Hello YouTube, it's Lion here with Hobbies of Man once again, and today we are doing another light novel review, or more specifically an original English light novel review. And today we are reviewing Lord of Goblins Volume 2. Now, before we get into this, if you want to check out the review for the first one, which is kind of not that great anymore because I have maybe not necessarily evolved, but gotten much better at doing reviews now than when I first reviewed this, you guys can check it up there in the card. Basically, I did enjoy it. I thought it was really cool. There was some general issues with the kind of way the plot was developing because it felt like there was a lot of things that wanted to be done, and I would have preferred it if they were done in a different way. But in general, I did enjoy it. I thought it was really cool, and it was significantly refreshing because it's an isekai with a sort of sci-fi background, so it's really cool. But that's the general idea behind Volume 1. Let's get into Volume 2 now. So the title obviously is Lord of Goblins, Volume 2. The authors here are Michael Werbrook and Hadi Bendakje, I think. I'm not exactly sure how to pronounce his name, but that was my best attempt. I hope I got it right. And if I didn't, sorry, Hadi. I did not mean any disrespect. It's just hard to pronounce your name. Now, the publisher here is Moonquill, as you guys can see right there, and over here on the side. I also want to mention that the illustrators here are Darkness Comics, who I guess are partnered up with Moonquill currently. And that's pretty exciting, I guess. The demographic here is kind of tough to place. This directly says ages 13 and up. However, I don't necessarily agree with that labeling. I think this is safer to be put in 16 plus. There's a lot of mentions of, difficult subjects and very dark and brooding type of ideas that really, I don't necessarily think that 13-year-olds would really either understand or really connect with. So I would put this more on the higher end of shonen, like if we're talking shonen, like something like lower than Chainsaw Man in terms of like content, but like maybe a little bit higher than My Hero Academia. And I would also say that this falls in the same kind of range in a Western YA. So something like almost getting to adult fantasy, if that makes sense. And the genres here are isekai and fantasy. And like I mentioned earlier, there is an element of military sci-fi here that is present through the inclusion of these flashback scenes to further develop the main character. So that's pretty cool. I did really enjoy that. It's a cool blending of all of these genres because it's not really science fantasy or space fantasy or anything like that. It's like very clear, defined two different genres that are meshed together via this kind of like weaving of plot lines, and I thought that was really cool. And adaptations-wise, this does not currently have an adaptation, but Darkness Comics is working on developing a webtoon for this, which is really awesome. I really do hope to pick up the webtoon at some point. I think that's going to be super cool. And hopefully Moonquill publishes it physically so I can own it. But yeah, the premise here is that following immediately after the end of Volume 1, Lev and Verga must find a way back to the expedition force, like the people that they were with the like the other bogies and the other goblinoids, right? And they managed to not do that, but they end up going back to their own town. And when they're there, they learn that basically war has broken out between all of the different goblin clans, and it's a civil war. And now, they have to go back, join the bogey faction that is currently fighting without their leaders, and join forces to take back their freedom, because it was kind of explained in the first volume that bogies, the Greyborns specifically, which are these people, are subjugated and put under the control of others because they led an uprising at one point and they had very powerful magic. Now they're not allowed to have magic and they're barely allowed to be alive. And so that kind of led to a lot of resentment. And now that the war has broken out, the bogies are trying their best to, reclaim their freedom, which is very cool premise, very interesting. But yeah, so let's jump into the actual review section. This was all kind of introduction. So let's just jump into the plot line here. I think it's very good. In general, it's very well done. It's very well executed. It feels a lot more fluid than last time because we don't have to spend so much time introducing characters. But there is a certain problem that I kind of noticed, and it's because this is something that I would have not noticed otherwise if I had read this immediately after reading volume 1. But since it's been about 6 months since I read the first volume, I noticed the glaring lack of a very, like a good reintroduction into the world. Like, there was a prologue that was basically a page long that kind of summarized the fact that, you know, the main character has been in this world for about a year, and that, you know, stuff is very different, and that he's sharing a body and stuff like that. But it didn't really feel like you were easing back into the world. It felt like it needed more, right? It needed a kind of summary of the previous volume, as well as a kind of shifting into this new volume that I feel was lost. And I would have actually really appreciated that, because, like I said, I read the first volume a long time ago, and getting back into this was kind of tough at the beginning because I felt like I was dropped in the middle of the action with no way to orient myself. So I would have really appreciated if Michael and Hadi had actually added a longer reintroduction into the world that wasn't like labeled as a prologue, but rather like the first section of the first chapter. But overall, the plotline is good. There's a very clear, defined like aspect to it. It's basically it starts as a survival mission, right? Lev and Virga and all of the other goblins that got stuck with them have to go back into, you know, meeting with the rest of the goblins that they left behind. But in order to do that, they have to go through all of these different caverns and places and like ancient ruined cities. And so there's this element of exploration there that I thought was really cool. And it's actually used in a very nice way to weave in the world building in a cool way, because it's like they're going through these places, and to go through them, they have to explore them. And along the exploration, they find information that is relevant and important to them and to the broader world of Lord of Goblins, which I thought was really nicely done. After that happens, we move into the kind of war arc, and we have like 2 or 3 big battles, and each of these battles works to highlight a different character and to develop the relationships between each of them. And I thought that was really cool, as well as having a pair of flashback scenes to Lev's original world, which is ours, in like the distant future, which had a very distinct military sci-fi feel with this kind of element of dystopia there, which was really interesting. And generally, it worked really nicely because it's a bit of a palate cleanser after certain like heavy aspects. But like, I do want to highlight that it was much better done this volume than it was in the first one. And then we also had some other kind of like small palate cleansers when we switched perspectives to Lev's sister, which is Gorza, which I thought was really nicely done. Like, the plotline was weaved really well, in a very nicely done way that I thought was really good. Like, I can really see Hadi and Michael growing as authors through the progression of this volume, and I really appreciate it because it's so well done. But yeah, however, I do want to mention that the writing style was a bit odd. Like there's nothing wrong with the style and the way they present ideas. Everything is fine. It's very straightforward. I really enjoyed it because it's not flowery prose, which I personally dislike quite a bit, which is odd because epic fantasy is littered with that, and it's also my favorite genre. But I do want to note that the language used, I guess, or the expressions, the way that the story was told to you, felt very military sci-fi-esque, while everything that was happening was fantastical, fantasy-like, right? And it was a really odd dissonance for me. Like, in my head, I was like, why does this feel like I'm reading about dudes killing aliens when we're talking about bogies and goblins fighting each other? That was a really odd situation for me, because I've never really experienced it before. And I know that there's a thing, like, styles and genres are written differently, but it's a very subtle difference, right, that I really can't explain to you. but I noticed it and it made me feel really odd. Like seriously, I was reading like parts of Lev, leading this battle, and I felt like I was reading military sci-fi when I knew in my head that it was a bunch of like little goblin Vikings fighting each other, and I found it really odd, but very like enjoyable and fun. But I don't necessarily think that this is something that is applicable to everyone. It's just something I noticed that is applicable to me. If you guys noticed it, please let me know down in the comments. But it's very interesting. I don't know how to phrase it or how to describe it or why it happened. It's just something that I felt while reading. So yeah, but overall, very good. The flashbacks were minimized. They were kind of not taken out completely because that doesn't work. But it was minimized and reduced in such a way that they didn't feel like they stopped the story for you so that they could do something a little bit different to the side and then came back to the other thing. It all kind of wove nicely, which is really good. So now let's talk characters. There's a bigger focus on Verga here. Verga is Lev's antagonistic character. He is another, bogey Greyborn, but he happens to have noble blood, and so he's much larger than all the other bogies, and he has a better education. However, the focus we got on him was actually kind of interesting because it highlights like how messed up this society is and how he isn't necessarily a bad guy. He's a victim of circumstance of his of the reality that he lives in, which is somewhat good in the sense that it sympathizes us to him, but it allows him to still be pretty darn evil, or maybe not evil, but really rough around the edges and really kind of gray to dark aligned. And I thought it was really nice, but I don't know, I felt like kind of odd because this really felt more like Verga's book than Lev's, although Lev is still clearly the important character and all of the world building and stuff relates to him. I don't know, I just felt like the focus was on some different characters. But overall, that was good. It's starting to feel very epic fantasy-like, which is really good with all of the different perspectives and stuff. So, the writing is really well done. I'm really enjoying the development of the writers. And then Gorza gets some time, like I said. And there's a few very big developments for Lev. So we get to learn more about his past in the flashbacks. Nothing really clear. Like, we just know things about him and situations that he has lived through that kind of teach us a little bit about his skill set, but there's nothing really about him as an individual. We kind of already know that he's kind of really cynical and really doesn't care about anyone else but himself. And that he's going to do whatever he has to achieve his goals, but we don't really know why he wants to achieve his goals and what the point of everything is. And also, even if it was, because he's a good guy and he wants to develop the world and help people, it doesn't really jive with the way that he goes about it. If you really care about people and individuals and, want to do good by society, you're not going to, treat people like they're objects and like they're toys and pawns to use, right? So there's a weird dissonance here with Lev, but I really do enjoy his character because it's rather complex. There's also quite a few things here where, we get to learn why Lev is in this world, which is really nicely done. But it's a very complex thing. I felt like I learned a little bit, but not enough to really understand. And I'm really excited to see where it goes. This is setting up to be a very long-running series, and hopefully it does manage to last as long as it needs. But I don't know. I think it would do well if it picked up the pace a little bit and took its time to explain things a little bit better. But yeah. Now, there's a few other side characters that were introduced and that did stuff. But really, there's not that great of a development for any of them. There's nothing too bad, but there's nothing too great with them either. So it's just there, right? Now, world building here. It's not super clear, but we got a lot of Goblin history and social standing stuff and hierarchy and how things work. And I really wish that we had a different index page where it kind of explains the historical information for each thing. We have this one at the beginning that, in my opinion, works really nicely because it gives you it's this glossary, right? And it tells you about all of the different characters and how they do and like what it is, right? And stuff like that, and the different tribes and neutral zones and stuff. I think it would do well with a index or a secondary glossary where it focuses on explaining to you the different historical bits and things that happen and that are brought up during the story. It would be really nice because it wouldn't be something that you'd have to remember. You'd be able to go back and reference it when it's brought up, which is, you know, always really nice in these fantasy type stories that really require a lot of information to truly appreciate, right? But it still, I thought it was super interesting. So there's really no real complaint in terms of like how it was presented to me. I think, like I said earlier, it was woven into the plotline really well and felt nice. But the actual like historical aspect of it was a little bit confusing because it's like, are there gods, or are these just like people that like were particularly amazing and so they were revered as gods? And there's a lot of questions here that need to be answered, but really are never, like, you can't even speculate because it's not very clear. Like, there's no base to speculate on, and I wish that they had a little bit of that developed. But I'm looking forward to seeing how they work on the world building. So yeah. Now let's talk about the art. Well, I think it's really good. I think maybe it's not the greatest thing ever, but it's very nicely done. It's very clear. It's very defined. It has very sharp edges. And everything is outlined really nicely. However, I felt like sometimes the moments where we're looking at character images compared to background images or kind of these like apparitions, the art doesn't connect between each of them. It feels like different people did it, and I'm not exactly sure that that's true. So I don't know why this is happening, and I feel that a more concise, clear, like style for each illustration would be better, because it feels a little weird that all of the illustrations are kind of like slightly different, like in style and the way that information is displayed. I don't know if I'm making myself clear with that, but I don't know. Like, it didn't feel like the same person drew them, if that makes sense. So I would like that to change, I guess. Like, I would like it to be more concise as an art, like a art style. There you go. That's what I meant. But again, I'm not an artist, so I don't really know the correct way to articulate myself in this sense. But hopefully that made a little bit of sense. Now, fan service wise, there's really no fan service. I don't really know that there can be that much. I mean, I guess there can be a little bit of fan service because these are basically humans with green skin and sharp pointy ears. But there was really no like moment where it could have happened, so that's probably why there wasn't any. But there's bound to be some at some point. So look forward to that, I guess, if you're interested in that. It's basically like Monster Girls, so there you go. Yeah, now rating-wise, I think this is a solid 4 out of 5. All of the issues I had were not necessarily issues of the writing or like the development of the story. More of it was kind of like the way things came off and the way I perceived them. And in fact, I think that most of the issues I had are more like things that can be tweaked and nitpicking on my part than it really is like glaring problems. So that's why I gave it a 4 out of 5. It didn't really like, it wasn't like really polished, so that's why I didn't give it a 5. But, you know, it's very well done regardless, and I really did enjoy it. So 4 out of 5. It's just great above average work that a lot of people would enjoy if they give it the opportunity and kind of allow themselves to get over the weird kind of like problems that occur in the first volume with the inconsistencies with the flashbacks being sci-fi and the current story being fantasy. But yeah, so I definitely recommend this title. I think it's really well done. Like I said, I definitely recommend that you buy both of them at the same time so you can read one and then immediately read the other one. But obviously buy them however you want, right? Now, similar titles here. I think Slime Isekai, or I the one time I got reincarnated as a slime, is a very, maybe not exact, comparison, but it's very similar. It deals with this guy that got reincarnated into another world, and now, at least the first volume of Slime, he has to, take care of these goblins. So it's pretty cool. It's very fun. However, the main characters are quite different. Like, Rimuri is a very kind of neutral, nice guy, and Lev is very definitely not a very nice guy. He's a really, like, military guy. He has a lot of, emotional stuff that he has to work through. But overall, I think it's fun, and I think Slime Isekai is pretty similar. Now, I also asked Michael about this a long time ago, and he said that the most similar story to this from manga and anime would probably be Re-Monster. So, I don't know anything about that one, but that's what the author, or one of the authors, said would be most similar. So, there you go. Now, that's basically it for me. So I hope you guys enjoyed this video. If you did, please leave a like, subscribe, and comment down below. Let me know what you thought. And of course, go support Moonquill if you guys can. I'll leave their Twitter and the Amazon page to Lord of Goblins down below in the description. So please do check that out. But yeah, thank you guys so much for watching. I really do appreciate it. And see you guys later.